welcome. Well, no, I guess, no, I want to say thank you for having me. I got to tell you, I've known Linda a long time, and I will tell you right now, I know I'm here on false pretenses. Because we were talking a while back about the new edition of the book, and she said something to me, and mid-sentence she stopped me. She said, "Tell me, Tweed, do you believe in free speech?" So silly, of course I believe in free speech. She said, "Great, how about coming to College Station and giving one?" I wouldn't dare say no to Linda, so here I am. Before we get started, I'd like to get started with a little bit of fun. I'd like to see a show of hands. How many transplanted Texans are there in the room? Okay. Watch this one, Linda. How many natives are there in the room? Wait a minute, you can only put up one hand. I know all about that double voting thing in Texas, and we're not going to have any of it, okay? No, I love this place, and we'll talk a little bit more here in the future. I am so blessed to be where I am. Truth be known, I actually fell in love with Texas after I'd been here for about 3 weeks. And anyone who knows me, in fact, Linda referred to it in the introduction, I eat Texas for breakfast. I love it. I can't get enough of it. I love this place, and I admire her people. And somehow, I knew when I got here that Texans were one and indivisible long before I knew there was even a flag pledge. Okay? Let me explain that. One of the greatest attributes or the greatest attractions for me has always been the fact that Texas has this attitude, this can-do thing that it just drew me in here. I'm going to tell you a story, and this is totally off script. When I was a kid, there was a kid in my neighborhood by the name of Donnie. Now, Donnie was a kid who was always picked last for the team. He was the slowest guy in the bunch, and that's because Donnie actually survived polio. And the greatest gift his mother gave him was that she never told him that he was handicapped. He didn't know any better. He got up, he fell down a lot, but he kept going. Well, let me cut to the chase. The reason I know Donnie so well is because that was me. I was that kid. And I always had this thing that I didn't know I was handicapped and I couldn't do things. I just got up and did it anyway. Well, years later, I grew up in Laconia, New Hampshire. Okay, and I'm not a native. Now, before we go any farther, I'd like to see a show of hands. Who in this room got to choose where you were born? Okay, there's your answer. You don't get to choose where you're born, but you dang sure get to choose where you live. And ladies and gentlemen, in all humbleness, I am home. This is where I belong. Now, when I joined the Navy to see the world and went to boot camp the morning after high school graduation, 7 months later, I find myself living 2 miles outside of beautiful downtown Kingsville, wondering who I ticked off. Because I knew right away if it walked, if it crawled, if it slithered, it would hurt you. On top of that, the plants can draw blood. Oh, this is going to take some getting used to. And then a couple of years later, I met and married a native Texan. You marry a Texas girl, your life is essentially over. You're not going anywhere. You have two options: acclimate or die. I bought in pretty quick, and I love this place. As I said, I was only here for a few weeks, and I knew I belonged here because of that can-do attitude. These people don't know what no is all about. There's a spirit here, and while I was researching even the original book, Texas in Her Own Words, one thing came greatly apparent to me, and that was that Texans are how thinkers. If never enters into the equation or the conversation. If is just not part of it. And I'll tell you, you're one determined bunch, but you already know that. But I understand where that comes from. Truth be known, as I said, I fell in love with Texas in the first 3 weeks, and I'll never forget the very first time I saw a Texas flag in the rear view window of a pickup truck. And I thought, wow, they don't do that where I come from. As a matter of fact, to me, it was like a sign from above that this is Texas. There's no hiding that. Now, to really understand the spirit of Texas, you just need to talk to her people, and I've done lots and lots of that. You embody the resilience and the determination like no other people that I know. And you do not take no for an answer. In fact, when you're presented with a challenge, your first response usually is, well, how do we make this happen? It's not a case of if it's possible. You just know there's a way. You've just got to figure it out. This grit and determination is seen in virtually every business or to education and even, of course, in sport. Now, you've heard that saying, everything's bigger in Texas. In fact, I use it every day on my tours at the Capitol. When we talk about the Capitol Dome, if you've been there, you probably have. At the top of the Capitol is the Goddess of Liberty. She's holding a star. From the top of that star to the ground is 303 feet. That equates into another number. That simply means that our dome in Texas is 14.5 feet taller than the one in Washington, D.C. I can assure you that was not an accident. It's Texas. It's got to be bigger, and it is. Now, there's something else behind all this success. There's something that's intangible, and yet it's always present. And that's a certain degree of pride that binds every Texan together under one banner. And it basically says, we're proud to be Texans. And that pride runs deep, and it transcends state lines like a beacon. It urges everyone to reach for their dreams, no matter how big or how small those dreams might be. In Texas, in her own words, my research revealed one thing too, and that was that Texans truly believe that anything is possible if you set your mind to it and you work hard enough to achieve it. Now, from launching businesses to redefining what it is to compete in sports, Texans are relentless dreamers, and they refuse to quit, and even if, until they've made their mark on the world around them. And that is one reason why I'm so proud of Texas. Now, to start with, Texas has always been a brutally tough place to live. Going back to the Austin colony in the 1820s, this was a brutally tough place to live. You had to earn the right to live in Texas. You had to earn the right, and you earned it by surviving. It was that tough. And that's just the way it was. Now, and a lot of things, you know, it's still that way in some places. But the people who came to Texas came from places like Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, all across the South. But I will tell you right now, I'll submit to this, that is that where they came from is not important. It's what they brought with them. It's who they were. These, for the most part, were frontiersmen and farmers. They knew what it takes to live off the land. If you couldn't do that, if you couldn't do that and do it well, you were going to die. It was that simple. There wasn't any really deep equation on that part. And they knew how to live off the land, as I said, and it was necessary and important skill to possess. And if you couldn't do it, well, you're in real trouble. The settlers had to figure that out, and they had to figure it out quickly. In that case, no was not an option. Failure just will not cut it. So they worked really hard at that, and they kept trying to find ways to do what they needed to do to be successful. And I believe this is a part of the Texas mindset. When I was doing the book, the reason I wrote the book basically was that I got tired of hearing, well, yeah, it's not like you were born in Texas. These people have got another darn gene. There's a T chromosome, I bet, and I'm going to go find it. And I took off, and Linda can tell you, I went all over this state. I went El Paso, Nacogdoches, Amarillo, to the valley. I can't tell you how many places in between. And essentially, I asked people two questions. One, what makes Texas special? Why is this place so by golly different than anywhere else on the planet? And you know it is. And on top of that, if it applied to them, what's it mean to you to be a native Texan? Would you explain that to me in American so I can understand? And I got some really, really remarkable answers, and I met some incredible people along the way. Now, I've learned another thing too. Texans are problem solvers, big time. And it's because of that mindset that I believe I can name at least 3 industries that were invented in Texas. Let's start with the cattle industry. There was the oil industry and the computer industry. Let's go back in time. When the Civil War ended, well, the men came home. There was a lot of destruction. There was a lot of work that needed to be done. Construction and rebuilding was needed, but the progress was slow initially. And then with all the men returning home from the war, there was a glut of manpower, and especially the newly freed black men. And there just weren't enough jobs in Texas to cover everybody. However, there was this situation, and that was that there were thousands upon thousands of head of wild longhorn cattle grazing everywhere. Nobody owned them. And then as more and more people, obviously the demand for beef was up. Now, the problem was trying to take care of that demand. But you got to understand, there was a huge logistical problem with that, and that was getting those cattle to the slaughterhouses or to market. That was very, very difficult. Cattle needed to be herded over 1,000 miles or more, and that trip would take 3 or 4 months to get them there. And that took some strong, hardy young men to get it there. And keep in mind, that meant that these guys had to eat. Well, satisfying those large hungers every day was going to take a whole lot more food than they could pack in their saddlebags. So, enter Charles Goodnight. Charles Goodnight was a pioneer rancher. In fact, he actually lived in a cave, basically, in Paladera Canyon for a while with his wife. But he was a businessman, and as I said, a pioneer rancher. And then he saw right away, he recognized the need. And then what he did is he came up with a really simple solution. It was so simple, it's amazing that nobody thought of it before. He took a bureau and he put it on the back of a wagon. He created the first chuck wagon. The chuck wagon created an industry because now the cowboys can go along and they can eat and they can get these cattle to market. And through Goodnight's efforts, like I said, he created an industry. He made millionaires out of a lot of other people, but because of what he did. And what he did, and keep in mind, that work was not for the weak or the lazy, but here again, an industry was created out of that. And looking back, I think it's safe to say that Charles Goodnight invented the very first food truck. Am I wrong? I don't think so. Now, he helped change the eating habits of much of the world. And although oil had been discovered in several places around the United States, it wasn't until Spindletop came in Beaumont when the oil industry became viable. And that was in 1901, and the industry obviously would have a massive impact on everyone's life. And to me, the wildcatters became the new cowboys. Okay, now that, again, that's very hard and dirty work. And it's often been said that when Texas discovered oil, well, Texas changed the world. That is absolutely true. Now, and you think about it, without the oil industry, there would be no automotive industry. A lot of industries were born as a result of that discovery because they made oil useful. And without oil, think about it. Would Henry Ford have invented the Model A or the Model T? I don't think so. So here again, the oil industry began in Texas. And we all know the impact that's had on the world ever since. And also about 50 years after that, the very first computer chip was developed in Fort Worth. And that went on to become the first computers. And we all know the impact that the computer industry has had on the world. Remember the company Texas Instrument, TI, you know, Tandy Corporation? A lot of these companies came on the scene. They changed, well, they just, again, another whole industry has come along. And we've seen how much the computers and the high-tech companies have had an impact on the world. They've exploded everywhere onto the scene. The impact of the industry, or that industry, is they've created a never-ending supply of solutions to problems, you know, the applications for it. Now, what did these three industries have in common? Not a single one of them was successful by accepting the concept of no. Just wasn't part of it. Now, whether they be pioneers or explorers or inventors, they pressed on to create solutions to problems. And undeterred, they pressed on, they created a better way of doing things. And did they ever fail? Oh, you bet they did. They fell down and failed a lot. I've talked about this before. One great thing about Texas is, you know, if you don't like where, well, to start with, if you fail, people don't hold that against you in Texas. You just get up and you just dust yourself off and say, you know what? That didn't work. Now, how? How do we make this happen? And you find another way. And the other thing about Texas is it's so great that you can, if you don't like where you live, you can pick yourself up, get in your car or truck, and you can drive 50 miles in any direction and be in an entirely different world, and you don't need new plates for your truck. Just say it. Now, the great thing about all this, this reinventing themselves, they pressed on, they reinvented their processes or themselves if that was necessary. But they achieved these accomplishments, and it all boils down to what I call the Texas mantra. No is not an option. And when you think about it, there is no progress when you give up. And I'll tell you, Texans are, by nature, they are not quitters. They see a problem, and suddenly it becomes a challenge. And then they'll take it head on, run right into it. I've often joked in the past about how many a Texan, the last word you ever heard from them was, "Here, hold my beer, watch this." They just go right headlong into it. I admire those qualities, I truly do. And frankly, that's why I live here. Now, I've always admired those folks, and I've taken to that can-do attitude. And that goes back to my childhood, that can-do. It may not be like everybody else. You can do, you just don't quit, you just keep pressing on. And that still reinforces that concept, that Texan concept of if you can dream it, you can achieve it. And the other great thing is Texas has such a great big stage to live out your dreams. It's truly the land of opportunity, and you don't have to be wealthy to create something or invent something. You just have to be brave enough to go out and do it, and do not take no for an answer. And that's why I believe that Texans are some of the most creative problem solvers anywhere in the world. So if you ever face a challenge, remember that Texans are some of the toughest problem solvers anywhere. And if you don't succeed at first, well, that just simply means that you haven't found the way yet. You just keep at it. And that's why I think Texas will always remain strong. And that's one of Texas' absolute strengths. It draws us closer together, and that's why my conclusion is simple, and it's quite obvious, that we are Texans, one and indivisible. Now, if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, or I'll certainly try. I'll give you an answer. I can't promise it's the right one, but I'll give you an answer.